All right, good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to the Truck Around and Find Out podcast. We are going to discuss some hot topics surrounding trucking, safety, community, and our lives up here in northern Colorado. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Byers, the owner of Front Range Compliance Services and DOT University, where we work with companies to help them with their DOT compliance and their safety programs. And we are joined today with the other host, Keith Couch, with Rush Truck Centers and Rocky Mountain Peterbilt Online. Keith, is there anything you want to add to that? I know we need to get you some more truck sales.
Yeah, things are kind of slow, but they're saying that this is the worst recession in the trucking industry since they started keeping records. So
Wow.
we'll get through it. We'll get through it.
Yeah, it's bound to take a turn,
It will.
hopefully someday soon.
We can't do without them.
We definitely can't, that type of thing. I listen to that Big Dog Radio a lot, and they talk about some of that, and it's pretty frightening, the stuff that's going on out there with those truck sales and that. So hopefully that turns real fast, and you can start moving some Peterbilts again. They sure are pretty trucks. I love your videos of your that you spend time doing, walking around them and telling everybody. You do a really great job with that. So perfect. So today's topic, I wanted to kind of bring up a very interesting topic, and that is machinery, the transportation of something that has a combustion engine, and how that is considered a hazardous material. But before we get into that, Keith, I think that you've got some news releases that we're going to kind of get into first.
Yeah, it's the CVSA 2025 International Road Check results. Is kind of what we've got here. October 7th, so not too long ago. They released this that on May 13th to 15th. The CVSA did a 72-hour international road check inspection, which is U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And 13,553 vehicles, 3,317 drivers, and 177 were hazardous materials or dangerous goods out of service violations. So you're saying internal combustion engines is a part of this?
Well, when you get into the hazmat side of it, transportation of a combustion engine is considered hazardous material, yes. And, they added that to the table several years ago. But, talking a little bit about this road check, these results, it's, they, like you said, they just released this on October 7th, and this is from the May road check. And drivers that are listening to us, y'all know what we're talking about. They do that check, once a year. But when they release these findings, it's pretty interesting to come out and look and see what some of these results are from these inspections and the sheer amount of numbers that they put up. And we'll make sure that this document is kind of with the notes, so you can come back and check it out. And you can also go to CVSA and Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and you can pull up the past inspections to see what some of the turning points were, kind of with that. So when you get into this, though, it kind of goes through and talks and breaks down, the different categories of the inspection, and kind of starting over here on page 2 of the press release. Of the findings, they get into the vehicle violations, and they kind of release a few different tables that kind of go through and talk about the number of violations that they found and the percentage of out of service that kind of came with that. And it's pretty alarming, when you kind of see what's going on when it comes to the vehicle violations. The number one defect, Keith, did you notice that between Canada, United States, and Mexico, the number one defect
Brakes.
That was brakes. Yeah. Teaching the vehicle inspection classes and the periodic inspection classes. This is a battle that seems like it's never ending.
So since we're talking about brakes, and this isn't something we talked about beforehand, as an inspector, if you see a truck, obviously with drum brakes, obviously you're going to pull it in, inspect it and everything. What I have been told, now I'm not a professional driver, but we've been selling a lot of trucks with disc brakes. So you see a truck that comes in with disc brakes, what the guys are telling me, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they say if you've got disc brakes, they just wave you through.
Oh, well.
Is that true?
It's a little bit, but not really. So yeah, the you can still do a brake inspection just to make sure all the parts are there. The difference is all your disc brakes today, the push rod from the brake can, that brake chamber, it's completely encased within that braking system. So there's typically, when it comes to a disc brake, you don't have a way to measure to see what your stroke
Right.
travel is. So all you're really checking for there is to make sure you have linings. So those linings can't be
Brake pads.
less than a
Yeah.
16th of an inch on your brake pads, making sure that the rotor is in good shape, looking at the wear on that rotor between the left and the right side. You're checking your vent ribs that between the two,
Hmm.
for the heat dissipation to make sure you don't have any cracks or anything in there. That's about it. There's
So they are much simpler
they much
and
more simple.
easier to inspect.
And I think overall we'd all agree that they're a more efficient braking system than the
Well,
old fashioned drum,
yeah. And when you're coming off mountains, down hills, they don't fade.
Yeah, no, not nearly as bad for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, I think that those disc brakes are a better braking system. A lot of the newer trucks pretty much are coming equipped with that, but a lot of trucks still are having the drum. So in sales, is that an option? Like if I come to you and say I want a truck,
Yes.
I can say I want all disc, or I don't want disc and I want
Yeah.
drums.
And to meet the braking standards, what most manufacturers have had to do is put disc brakes on the steer axle.
Right. Okay.
But I can still deselect those as an option and put drums on the steer axle,
I got you.
which I don't understand because if that's a federal regulation, how can I back off of that? But 99% of the trucks I sell are disc brakes all the way around
Yeah.
because they are better.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed. I
the
think maintenance
cost
is
difference, maintenance is less. The cost difference is much closer than it used to be.
easier. It is.
And I think, I know a trucking company that driver, I don't know if he fell asleep or what, but wound up going through a construction zone and they drug, I didn't sell him trucks. It wasn't a Peterbilt. It wasn't from me or anything, but the other sales guy, and I knew who it was, they drug him into court because the other attorney said, why didn't this truck have every single possible safety item, which he was considering brakes, disc brakes better than drums. Why did this truck have drums? It could have had discs. So, I mean, they drug him into court and he doesn't sell trucks anymore. He was like, that was so traumatic.
Oh,
He
that
says,
is.
I'm out.
That is.
And I don't want that either. So, that's one thing I tell people when we're building trucks, whether it's for an owner operator or for a fleet. It's like, look, these are better. It is an increased cost, but it's not very much.
Wow.
And the anti-brake system, one way a lot of competitors get around is they do 4 modulators or 4 sensors, 4 modulators. Well, that's only the rear of the truck. I put them on every axle, 6 on the end of each axle because that goes to safety.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so interesting you bring that up. I hadn't heard that side of the story, but I've seen that in other aspects when it comes to the safety, such as, with all these new telematic systems and that where, I've seen, I've seen companies and heard their stories. I haven't participated in it, but where companies have gotten into lawsuits because they weren't utilizing the safety systems.
Correct.
Or they didn't purchase the system with the full telematics and that was available to them and that potentially could have prevented a crash and all that stuff. It's terrifying because it's leading to these huge nuclear verdicts and
Correct.
different things that are going on. So if you're going to get into trucking straight up, I mean, you have to get into it with the safety in mind. And if there's something that you can do to prevent a crash, if you don't want to end up in a lawsuit later on with good old Frank Azar, that strong arm, he's advertising nationwide now, trying to say you've been hit by a truck in Colorado, not were you at fault or just you've been hit by a truck. Call me. So they're fishing big time for these lawsuits. But when it comes to the brakes, I think that one of the things is so interesting. So we switched as an industry in our nation in 1994. We switched from the manual slack adjusters to automatic slack adjusters.
Correct.
So we had that period in 1994. So here we are 31 years later, And I'm still dealing with companies and mechanics that still do not truly understand how to deal with these brake systems. We still have guys with these automatic slack adjusters that are still doing manual adjustments on them. And it's terrifying. If you have a brake board and you have a brake that has some worn components in it, so that automatic slack adjuster will stop working anytime there's wear within that
Hmm.
brake. If you do a manual adjustment on an automatic slack adjuster, it only takes 10 brake presses. You hit the brakes 10 times, and that slack adjuster will ratchet right back out where it was starts. So we still have, since 1994 until now, 30 years, we still have guys that are still
Yeah.
treating these brakes that way. So that's why we still see these high violations in brakes. So I think anything that the industry can do to come to a brake system that's more efficient, that's going to keep them from getting in violation, I think the disc brakes is a good
Yeah.
definitive choice for
It is.
overall for safety. Just because, and I think definitely down the road we should put together a couple little episodes,
Sure.
probably just on brakes and brake
Yep.
adjustment.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go down a rabbit
Nah, I
hole
think
there,
that's a
but
great topic. As you go, the couple things pointing out though, just looking at these violations, when it comes to equipment, you'll see the defects between United States, Canada, and Mexico, and you'll notice that in the United States and Canada, we had 24% in the United States were put out of service for brake defects. In Canada, we were at 26%. But did you notice what happened down there in Mexico?
47%,
47%.
almost half.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So that's now granted it looks like there was only 16 brake inspections that they did, but of the 16, 8 of those trucks were looks like probably put out of service for
And
brakes.
and then I think I asked you this one time is I didn't know they did these kind of inspections in Mexico.
Well, that's funny. And just before I
I don't
respond
know
to
if I'm
that,
supposed to say that
I,
out loud, but
I, yeah, no, it's a good point. I did say that there were 16 inspections. I misspoke on that. There were 16 brake violations. I need to
yeah,
dive into
yeah.
the actual numbers, see how many they inspected. But 47 were put out of service. 47% was out of service. But yeah, I think when it comes to those inspections, I think those are the trucks that are coming into that commercial zone, along the Mexico United States border. So they come through Mexico, they come through the port, they make their delivery up in, say, I'm just going to use Texas for the example. They make their delivery, then they may grab a load and take it back down
Right,
to
back down. Something like
to
in
Mexico.
Juarez, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. So what they do get inspected when they come into the United States, because those
Okay.
companies are held to the same standard. Now, when they're just doing point-to-point transportation in Mexico, they're not adhering to CVSA guidelines. I'm not 100%
No.
what they're heading to, but when they do come in the United States, that those are for sure, adhering to the CVSA guidelines, or they're supposed to.
They're
Is what I
supposed
should
to.
say. Yeah, I think that's what they're
Because I've
supposed to.
seen a few.
Yeah, for sure. But definitely a great chart. It's pretty interesting to kind of go through and look at all these. I mean, it goes through, it breaks down your driver violations. I think that's the next category you see in there, and I think it's kind of alarming, And I see a couple of these driver violations, and man, you wouldn't think that this would be an issue in
So
today's.
the top out of service violation in all three countries,
Yep.
Canada, Mexico, and US, was for hours of service.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
thought the ELDs were supposed to be the cure all for that, but
yeah,
clearly they're not. So
32.4%.
32.4, yeah. But notice that, like, looking down at United States and Canada, you notice that number 2 out of service rate, and that's 24%.
No CDL.
No CDL. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
With the companies and stuff that we work with around here, we typically see that in your pickup trailer combinations. There's a lot of people, pulling.
Don't understand that.
Yeah, you look out, you see an 18-wheeler. Everybody in the world looks at that truck and says, that's a Class A vehicle. Pretty much you know that.
Yes.
But when you see a pickup, if you take like a 3500 series today with a gross vehicle weight rating of 13,000 plus pounds, and you take a 14,000 pound trailer, which is a
7,000-pound
very
axles.
common,
Yeah.
a very common
Very
trailer,
common.
but that's a Class A combination.
Because it's over 26,000
the
gross
whole unit,
combined.
yeah, the whole
weight
unit,
rating.
yeah, over
That's-
26, and the trailer. Don't forget that the trailer's over
Correct.
10, so that makes it that CDL combination. And when I was a trooper, Those were my favorite ones to pull over.
Oh, yeah.
Because you see them going down the road, you could tell it's commercial. You don't see a marking one. The cargo
Landscapers.
securement's not right. Exactly.
Yep.
I could name a few by name, but we'll leave them out of the discussion today. But yeah, those were just like guaranteed pulled over tickets. And I'd like to believe that that's the violations that we're seeing. Those were the trucks that got stopped. But I'm sure there was probably a case or two where somebody was driving a big truck and didn't have a CDL2, because that still
Yeah.
does happen occasionally. So
Yeah.
with that one, you ran into your next big violation, which was going to be medical cards.
No medical card.
Medical cards. Notice there was some false logs in there. And if you look at the top of page 5 of this report, you'll notice that they also had 5.1% out of service for drivers with a suspended driver's license or CDL that popped up. So, definitely going back to compliance programs, companies need to be really on top of these drivers and their state compliance with their licenses, and making sure that they're pulling those MVRs and that type of thing, which that's something that we do. We help a lot of companies out. Shoot, we pull thousands of MVRs every month. So yeah, very, very interesting. The next category it got into was seatbelt violations, which I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but the third topic is the one that I kind of wanted to focus a little bit on today, and that's going to be the hazmat.
Hazmat. Top 5 hazmat violations.
Yep.
Number 1, loading. So I would assume that's loading and securement.
So they're pretty generic in their language on this report. It'd be kind of nice if they broke it down and told us, okay, what is this? So I went and I grabbed, before we got started on this, just to see what was categorized in the North American Standard Out of Service criteria. And it has blocking and bracing. So we have, of course, general type cargo securement, making sure your load's not going to shift or seep or spill. But it also has segregation of cargo. So, not all hazardous materials can be transported or carried together, such as that they might have a violent reaction, or if they mix or commingle in some way, you're going to have a dangerous evolution of heat, and that's going to create a hazmat incident. So that was also in there. And then that last point that we had in there for the loading and securement was talking about poisons mixed with edibles. So those are the categories according to North American Standard Out of Service criteria. And since this is a CVSA release, I'm assuming that those are the 3 categories they're talking about when it comes to the loading. But then we jumped into shipping papers, which that one doesn't surprise me too much, because that's still one of those situations.
Oh, yeah.
And then placarding, that could be as simple as not having the correct placard, not having enough placards, that type of thing. The training certification, I thought that one was kind of interesting, because that is, that is something typically that's handled internally to make sure we have training. That's going to pop up in one of our next topics. And then, of course, markings. That's going to be everything from markings on a package. If it's a bulk like tank, of a gas, you got propane that's written on, that would be considered a marking requirement. Or if you have individual packaging markings inside the boxes that have the different markings that are required through that. So definitely some pretty interesting topics. But did you know, when it comes to hazardous material, the topic of the day is going to be machinery. Did you know, and I mean, now, because we obviously, before we did this, we had a little discussion, but if you are transporting a pickup, trailer, your commercial vehicle, private property carrier, maybe you're just a contractor, construction, small construction, whatever, and you've got a small machine, such as a little Mini X or a skid steer or something like that, did you know that transporting that is considered hazardous material?
Why?
Yeah, I think that's the question that we've all been asking ourselves for years.
If that thing falls off and skids down the interstate, it could explode. It could blow up.
If it's a Hollywood production, most likely.
Most of the time, it just skids off into the ditch.
Yeah, it's got some diesel in it. Typically, it's a fuel tank. It's always been like your vehicles that you're driving. The fuel has always been specifically exempted. That's the fuel you're carrying. It powers your vehicle. It's exempted. But they went back, going clear back to about 2012 to 2013 was when they implemented and they added combustion engines into the hazardous material tables. And they input that in. The guidance came out. We had three entries that got put in there in the hazardous material table, and that would have been about an internal combustion engine that's flammable liquid powered. So that's going to be something that's a class 3 like diesel or gasoline. But then they also put one in that is flammable gas powered. So we have an engine that is flammable gas powered. That's going to be your 2.1s, your flammable gas. So that could be powered by LNG or propane or whatever. So that might be, I don't know, the one that comes to mind for me would be like a little forklift. It's got the bottle on the back, And then they also have the kind of the catch-all, which would be the internal combustion engine that is just generic, and they made that a class 9, which would be a miscellaneous hazmat. So that one's a little harder for me to pop up with a specific example, but they added those to them. And Keith, nobody did anything with this for years. 2018 was kind of the big drop dead date where everybody was supposed to do something with it. But I think enforcement, they deal with this. They ask the company, and the company would say why, and enforcement officers never really had an answer. So they kind of just went through and ignored it. Nobody ever did really any enforcement on this. And then COVID hit. And you know how COVID was. I mean, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and a year and a half later, everybody's finally getting back to work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think when that happened, I know here in Colorado and anywhere that I traveled to during that time, the roads were empty. Enforcement wasn't out. Like Colorado, our interstates became the Autobahn. People were, you used to do 5 mile over the limit and you'd pass everybody. Now, since COVID, it's like you do the 5 mile over the limit and, people are blowing your doors
better be
off.
in the slow lane.
Yeah. So when that happened, I think with all that time, the enforcement officers nationwide, I don't know if they had meetings or PowerPoints and Zoom meetings, but they came out from that, and when you go into audits, there was all kinds of new violations were getting written up for companies, and this was one of them that really started popping up. So we kind of had an awakening experience, and basically what it was is if a company is going through and they're transporting the hazardous materials as a machine, they have to be registered on their MCS 150. First off, that they are a hazardous material carrier of a non-bulk class 9 or a class 3 or a class 2.1, depending on the type of machines that they have. So you have to declare this on your US DOT number. So that's an MCS 150 is the DOT classification. So once you get that on there, then that's really about all you had to do. And then through a closer inspection of this, then it became a little bit more. So it does the exception specifically that you find in 173.220, it does provide you an exception that says you're exempt from pretty much everything from the hazmat regulations. So you don't have to have shipping papers. You don't have to have placarding. You don't have to have pretty much everything that's in the hazmat regulation, which I know you're kind of looking at me cross-eyed right now, right? And it's like, well, then why? And it kind of takes us back to that same old question. So what is it that you really have to do? Like, what's their whole purpose? And I think the biggest one is going to be the insurance requirements. So when you go back to the motor carrier regulations, under Part 387, where it talks about the insurance and financial responsibility, if you are a hazardous material carrier, you have to carry a higher level.
Correct.
So for like a property carrier, so if you are a for-hire property carrier, you would have to have $750,000 of an insurance endorsement. Now, this is not your commercial insurance. This is an additional endorsement called the MCS 90 that you need to have with your insurance policy. And that's for for-hire carriers. If you're a private property carrier, you don't have to have this insurance.
Correct.
Except for if you're a private property carrier in interstate commerce and you carry any quantity of a hazardous material, now you have to have an insurance endorsement of
so
an
if you
MCS
carried
90.
your Mini X to Cheyenne.
Yeah, if we went from where we're at here in Loveland, Colorado, and you went up to Cheyenne, you would have to have an MCS 90 for $1 million, even though it's private property transportation.
So is the port going to check that?
Absolutely. They're going to make sure that everything is where it needs to be.
Since a piece of machinery is considered hazardous material, what are the rules for that going through like Eisenhower Tunnel?
Oh man, could you have warned me about that question before? It's not a placardable hazmat, so I do not believe. And if I'm wrong, if you're listening to this, just send us a note and I'll issue a correction. But I believe that Eisenhower Tunnel is placardable hazmat. But I didn't think about refreshing on that one.
Yeah, I saw a loader on a
Yeah.
lowboy go through there. We went over to Palisade to see some family,
Yeah.
and we were going through there, and there was a loader, and I just happened to think of it, and I was like, well, I wonder. I
Yeah.
don't remember anything special on that, but he went through no problem.
Yeah, no, the Eisenhower Tunnel is specific to the placardable amounts that go over. They have to
Okay.
go over US
US
6. So
6.
if they crash up there, which they do, they
They do.
slide off. It's
Yes,
a
they do.
pretty drive. You've never been over Highway 6. I would encourage you to do it in your 4-wheel car, not your
Yes.
18-wheeler. It's a
Yes.
lot more enjoyable in
It's
a small
gorgeous.
vehicle. It is a beautiful drive.
Beautiful.
It is it's going to add a couple hours to your trip, so you better plan accordingly.
Yes.
So with that being said, these drivers have to, or these companies, I should say, have to make sure they have their insurance set up correct. And there's one more thing: if they are in interstate commerce, meaning they're crossing a state line, and you have 3 points of interstate, that's going to be 2 points. From a point inside Colorado to a point outside Colorado, just using Colorado. So a point within a state to a point in another state, or 2 points within a state by the way of going through another state. So, for instance, in our area we're at, if I wanted to go from Fort Collins to Walden in the middle of the winter, it's probably going to be best interest to avoid Highway 14,
Correct.
which is windy, mountain, narrow, not the best place that you want to be in the middle of winter with a big truck. So companies will jump up to Laramie and they'll drop back down into Walden, but that's 2 points within Colorado. But by going through another state, that'll make you interstate. So you'd have to make sure you had the right insurance amount if you were doing that. And then the last one would be the continuation of a trip. The point or the origin is destined to go to a final location, but a point of the transportation is the hub of that is done all within one state. It's a continuation of an interstate trip until it gets to its final place. Yeah. So any of those three scenarios mean you have to have the correct insurance, but it also kicks in the hazmat training, which is another big why. Like, what do we train? Because when it comes to hazmat training, which when we talked about the dangerous goods and training certificates, point number 4, just to be clear, training certificate, that's going to be a Canadian thing because they have to carry their transportation of dangerous goods or hazmat. Here in the United States, we don't have that, so they're not really looking for the training unless you have to go through an audit. And if you have to go through an audit, you have to present your training, and you do have to have your drivers need to be trained. And remember that initial hazmat training, if you're carrying these engines, you need to provide the training that these guys need to know about that, the commodities, the function specific, hazmat awareness, emergency response information, that kind of thing. That has to be done within 90 days when they first hire somebody, and recurrently every 3 years they've got to go through that training. So kind of interesting. Other than that, not really a lot to do, but I fight this battle day in and day out with companies because I go in there, start talking to them about their commodities, and I'm like, okay, you transport machinery. Okay, we got to list you as a hazmat carrier, and I mean, people's heads just explode, right? Absolutely. And they're insurance companies, they give me the same response. But y'all, I just wanted to make sure we pass that along to you. It's kind of an interesting little situation, but yeah. So with that, the TAFO of the week, I'm going to kind of tie directly to our topic here, and that's going to be is if you go through a DOT audit and you have not, if you've been trucking around, you're going to find out because the auditor is going to come in and they're going to check to make sure you have that MCS 90, that insurance. They're going to check to make sure you do your training, and both of those are critical violations. So if you have not done this, you haven't done your training, you haven't got your insurance, you're going to take a critical. Now, when you go through,
this is in office. They're going to come to your office.
Yes, this is
or the trucking company's office.
Yep. Okay. This is when they do that compliance audit on your company, whether it be a focus just on hazmat topics, or maybe it's comprehensive where they're looking at the whole company. That's going to result in a safety rating, which is going to be either one of 3 options: satisfactory, which is our goal for everybody; conditional, which you wouldn't want because it's going to make your insurance rate skyrocket, or you're flat out going to lose all your insurance; or unsatisfactory. And what is wild is an unsatisfactory safety rating. Because now your hazmat, it's going to put it into 45 days, meaning you have to make everything right from the end of that audit within 45 days, and you have to submit a safety management plan to the FMCSA that basically says, dear sir, we're sorry we messed up. This is what we did wrong. This is what we failed to do. This is what we did to fix it. And this is what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again. You got to get that to them within 45 days with proof that you actually fixed this. and then you don't get put out of service. But with this one, like we just got through talking about out of service through the inspections, that's roadside inspector putting a driver out of service. This is the FMCSA looking at your company saying your entire company is out of service. So they shut you down, and that'll happen within 45 days. And something this minuscule, I mean, minuscule or not, I think it's minimal, but it can lead to some pretty serious violations. So just want to make sure you're prepared and that don't have this one kind of come in and bite you in the hindquarters. So
Got it.
perfect. So, all right. Well, that's about it that I've got for today's topic on this little hazmat thing, and of course the road check information. I think some of our upcoming podcasts we've been talking about topics, and we'd love to hear from you all. If you've got some stuff you'd like to hear us talk about, reach out to us. We'd love to get some more ideas from you. But I think one of our upcoming topics that you and I talked about is talking about some of the trucks, some of the old versus new. I think that could be a real fun topic, especially with some of the stuff we talked about today with these maintenance programs.
Absolutely.
So we've got that coming up, some roadside inspections and some violations. Some of the data has been released from the states of their top violations that we're seeing. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And one that you brought up earlier that we're going to plan on doing a podcast on is going to be manual versus automatic to automated. And I had no idea what that was, those transmissions.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear more about that, and then some stuff that's new with Peterbilt. So yeah, we're going to be planning some good shows.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it.
Perfect.
So thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Yet, we're working on that. But thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you on the next show.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Be safe out there, and thank you for what you do.
God bless you guys.
God bless you guys.